Our first guest tonight is one of 17 Republicans on the Judiciary Committee, but the 24 radical Dems on that committee carried the vote today to subpoena Special Counsel Robert Mueller's full report. The Judiciary Chair, Gerald Nadler, obviously intent on creating a political crisis, if not a constitutional crisis. Congressman Matt Gaetz also serves on the Armed Services Committees and is a Freedom Caucus member, and like his fellow Republicans today, voted against that subpoena. Congressman, great to have you with us. First, I must say, a resplendent green tie, and I would like to get your thinking about Nadler's intent here. It can't end well.
No, this is the anatomy of sore loserdom among my Democratic colleagues on the Judiciary Committee. Lou, these are precisely the people that told the country that they had actual evidence of collusion. And now that they've been caught in a lie, they're running out of plays to run. And so they continue to sort of I guess, harass the president in a variety of different ways. And it's our job to show the country what's really happening here. It's the same witch hunt, but just a different broomstick. And these Democrats are going to continue to pursue our president, even in the absence of evidence. And it seems like they just have no shame. I mean, I would think that if I went and told lies to the country for 22 months about collusion, I would at least say sorry.
Yeah, I don't think I would expect sorry from Nadler or Schiff or any of the other persecutors, but they really have nowhere to go here. What happens when the president says executive privilege, end it? The attorney general says these are the statutes and our requirements in meeting procedure and legal restrictions on releasing that information within the Mueller report.
I don't think for a moment that the two-time Attorney General Bill Barr is waiting around for the next missive from Jerry Nadler to figure out how to do his job. Attorney General Barr has operated at lightning speed, providing the conclusions to Congress even over the weekend of the Mueller report. And so certainly he's going to be faithful to his commitment to get as much as is appropriate and legal from the Mueller report into the public square. I've supported that, as has every other Republican in the Congress. But what we don't agree with is a strategy that would compromise sources and methods from our intelligence community, or that would limit our ability to conduct important investigations in the future. Democrats made these very arguments when we were trying to get the underlying documents as to how this whole ridiculous investigation got started in the first place. Now they're being total hypocrites.
Do you ever pine for the days when you had a Republican speaker and a Republican majority, say, last year?
Well, I certainly wish we had done more with the Republican majority, Lou. You and I are critics of the fact that when we had the gavels, we didn't do aggressive enough oversight to expose the genesis for this entire investigation and then hold the people accountable who committed the crimes that led to the witch hunt in the first place.
Yeah, it's very clear that I'm sure the entire conference, except for the most committed rhinos amongst them, there are many, would say it was history will record that as a missed opportunity for the Republican Party and indeed for the nation. Gerald Nadler, I like to call him Gerald Nadler. It just kind of keeps it balanced, to use that for the chair. He's making basically a mockery of oversight. I just want to quote what he said. Nadler and the Dems are probing alleged obstruction of justice, public corruption, and other claims against President Trump, not President Obama, who apparently was critical at the incipient point of the witch hunt, of the surveillance of a sitting president of the United States, and is still not being held to account.
It doesn't just end there, Lou. You look today, the radical Democrats are now trying to go and get Mr. Trump's tax returns from all the way back in 2013. So think about that in context. They still won't investigate why Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were texting about the fact that the White House and POTUS wanted to know everything about the Trump campaign during all of that illegal surveillance, but somehow they think the president's tax returns from 5 or 6 years ago is going to create some new sense of clarity for the country. country, it's ridiculous. We need to spend our time ensuring that never again is our intelligence process used for political gain by people who would convert opposition research into a document to justify surveillance on an American citizen. That is the real conspiracy. That is the real corruption. And everything else is the effort by Democrats to distract us from how corrupt the DNC and Clinton campaign were during this time with foreign adversaries.
And one of the questions that I think doesn't get much attention, if any at all, is why was it necessary to go to Fusion GPS? Why was it necessary to go through all of the skullduggery that the Justice Department engaged in and the FBI when they have 16 agencies in the intelligence community that had no clue about Russian intervention in an attempted intervention in the election, didn't apprise a single authority of that intervention, didn't warn the President of the United States elect, didn't warn the leading candidates, the leading candidate in the Republican Party, nor the new president of that intervention. It was an absolute failure of intelligence and mind-boggling. It's just utterly mind-boggling to me to think that the intelligence committees involved themselves in a witch hunt against a newly elected president instead of finding out what in the hell is going on with an inept intelligence community.
We can never let it happen again to any president, Republican or Democrat. That's why we need to look at legislation to open up the FISA process for more transparency, to confirm FISA judges publicly so we know what they believe, that they won't violate the rights of American citizens based on this kind of political crap. We should never have it again in the country. And what I'm upset about is that Democrats are turning a blind eye to that scandal and instead, hoping that page 342 of the Mueller report will be a saving grace for people who were lying to the country for 2 years on a fake Russia collusion narrative.
Well, speaking of investigations, this is a time for the president to investigate what is going on with his administration, to explore what it's going to take to actually deal with this emergency that he declared. DHS Secretary Nielsen is headed to the border tomorrow, to Yuma, Arizona, one of my old stomping grounds, to inspect the border. We are watching a nightmare unfold, a perfect storm, as I said at the outset of this broadcast, that involves outright stupidity, rank lack of knowledge about the border, about commerce on the border, and decades of presidents and administrations of both parties who have tried to avoid the reality that is now a complete and utter national emergency, as President Trump has declared. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I like the fact that our foreign aid is going to be conditioned on results, and we're not going to take the hard-earned dollars of American taxpayers and ship them off to countries in Central and South America who are not doing nearly enough to stop these caravans and these erosions of borders with mass caravans and migrations of people. Mexico could do more. Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador could do more. And I'm glad that the president's playing hardball, because this is serious. Americans are dying as a consequence of our porous border and the drug trafficking that is occurring there, and we should not be subsidizing failure in the Western Hemisphere.
And what do you think of shutting down that border? The Chamber of Commerce very quickly totaled up the daily cost, but they didn't release simultaneously a report about how much money corporate America and big business have made by exploiting cheap, illegal labor brought into this country.
Well, you and I both agree that America first means having a full web of policies, trade, border enforcement, and otherwise, that ensure that we're protecting American interests and the American economy. I'm going to be traveling to the border with Congressman Andy Biggs in the coming weeks, and we're going to be making evaluations. But our current view is that we're a reluctant yes to support the president using every tool at his disposal to finally get this problem solved.
Please don't be reluctant. Please don't be reluctant. It is a tough decision. It's the right decision. America, when it only works for business, is not working as America should. And that is fundamental. I'm so proud of the president standing up for national security above commercial interest. It is time for us. We are facing a national emergency. It's a time for sacrifice by everyone if necessary. Think about that. The possibility that all American citizens would share the burden of making a decision in the interest of national security. I think that, frankly, is a far easier sale than the radical Dems might suspect. Congressman, it's good to see you. We appreciate it. Matt Gaetz.